Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the RepPath podcast. Today, guys, we're going to talk about scrubs to sales. So, if anyone out there is a nurse, a tech, a PA, no matter what you are clinically, and you're looking to get into medical sales, this is the episode for you. All right. Before we get into it, as always, guys, if you have any questions from this moment on, please submit your questions into the chat, and me and James will address them halfway through the show. Uh, Also, for all of you guys, I just did a post, with the top 10 reasons of individuals that are struggling out there to break into the industry. Guys, stop stressing yourself out. Join the RepPath Academy today. So go right on RepPath.com. You can see the link on the screen there. Click the link. You can learn more about the Academy. You can see the companies that we've placed with in the past. And then most importantly, those testimonials at the bottom of the screen. We will help you break in, guys. The last thing I want to see, and I see this over and over, is people give up on their dream because of the frustration. This is not an easy business to get into. Okay, I know a lot of people do it on their own. That's great. God bless them. But 10 times as many struggle and give up on their dreams. I don't want to see you guys do that. Reach out to me. Shoot me a DM. Go on RepPath.com, whatever is easier, and we can get you signed up today. Lastly, if anybody wants to see a copy of this podcast or any other material that we produce, please go on my YouTube channel, the RepPath Academy. You can please subscribe. So it's 100% free, and you could get access to all our content that we've produced in the past and everything that we have coming out in the future. So great. Let's dive right in, guys. So scrubs to sales. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, these are for nurses, techs, PAs, anyone else clinically, anyone with a clinical background that is looking to get into the medical sales industry. And while I was never a nurse myself, I was never on the clinical side before I broke into medical sales. I know some of the reasons why people want to get into this industry. Those nursing jobs are amazing jobs, but a lot of times nurses are starting to get burnt out, being with patients every day, dealing, with the real life struggles, and I commend them for doing this, but it's challenging and it starts to wear on you. So I know a lot of times people are looking for a new career to get into that isn't so taxing on them daily. Also, the long hours. A lot of you guys are working 12-hour plus shifts. Sometimes, working overtime, working, 24-hour plus shifts. That wears on you over time. While you're still going to work your butt off in medical sales, it's typically not that type of commitment on a daily basis, where you're sitting in the hospital 12, 16 hours a day. Sometimes you will, but a lot of times you're not. Also the limited income growth. Again, not to talk down about anything that nurses and clinical individuals do. They have great careers, but a lot of times there's a cap to what you're going to make. In medical sales, it could be, 3-4 times as much, depending on how successful you are. So that's a motivator a lot of times for people to try to break in. And then lastly, in medical sales, you have more control of your schedule. Okay, I'm not saying every day you call doctors and say, hey, when do you want to do this surgery today? You know what, doc, I've golf with my friends, so, make it early so I can get by the course by 10 o'clock. No, you're still going to be dictated to a schedule. You're at the mercy of your customers, but it's still not the same where you have zero control of your schedule as a clinical personnel, as a nurse or tech. So these are some of the main reasons why people want to get in. So if any of these things fit your background, does this sound like you? Then again, stay tuned in this episode. Keep listening because this is the episode for you. Next up I want to talk about is why clinicians are moving to medical sales. Now, like I said, the burnout, okay? It's just something I hear all the time, guys. They're looking for better income. Now, I know nurses out there, they're making 6 figures, but I don't know that many that are making 250, 300,000, 400 or 500, whatever, some of these medical sales reps can make So you do have that opportunity for a much better income. Okay. I know a lot of nurses that go into certain clinical roles and they maintain a similar role that wasn't really too much different from what they were doing, but they because they're working with patients, they're working with doctors, they're just focused on whatever product that company's selling and in whatever area of the hospital, whether it's the cath lab, whether it's the OR, whatever it is. So they're doing a similar job, but could potentially be making more and working less hours. Again, the flexibility, being able to, control your day for the most part and control your schedule, is a major plus, not only for nurses and techs out there, but for anyone trying to break into the industry. It's one of the main reasons people love to get into not only medical sales, but any sales role, where basically, the harder you work, the more success you have, the more money you're going to make. It's just that simple. So in a nursing job or any other clinical job, it's not like you could say, well, I'm just going to, I want to just grind and work that much harder and you're going to make that much more money. Sure, there's overtime shifts and stuff like that, but there is a limit at what you're going to be able to do. And there's also a limit in flexibility. And lastly, career growth. Okay. I know clinical specialists that have started in the medical sales industry. They were nurses for 10, 15 years. They were in that same nursing role for 10, 15 years. They got their annual raises. They got their bumps. They were doing well. Then they took a clinical specialist role. Then a couple of years later, they were promoted to a territory manager. Then they were promoted to a regional business manager, all the way up to individuals that I know have gone up to the VP level. So there is, endless career advancement in this field. So I know that's a huge plus out there to make the transition. So next question is, why are clinicians so attractive for these roles? Number one, it's your clinical knowledge. I know it's like, man, no shit, Joe. But guys, it's a major, major plus for these hiring managers. The average sales rep, I'm one of them. You learn about that specific therapeutic area, the drug, the device. They teach you everything during training. But a lot of clinical individuals, they have real years of clinical experience. And it's not something that they just learned in a classroom. They have real life settings. That's the major difference. They know what it's like to be in an operating room. They know the challenges that are going on clinically when you're dealing with patients. That is so attractive for these companies because you could walk in on day one and know more about the clinical aspects of that drug or the device more than most of the sales team does, just because you have that hands-on experience. There's nothing like hands-on experience. And like I said, I touch on this, OR experience is huge. Majority of these roles are either in the OR or the cath lab for a device. So to have that experience, it's something that we all know. I mean, I've done it where I've been trained by companies. I get out in the real world and, you're scared shitless. You don't know what to do. There's nothing like having that hands-on OR experience to prepare you for those moments when things go wrong. We always see the moments when things are going right. That's the big difference that, especially a lot of you young individuals out there that are trying to break in, things don't always go right. Actually, a lot of times there is something that goes wrong in every case. When you have a smooth case where nothing goes wrong, it's like, wow, it's almost like a perfect sunny day outside that, we don't, I know sorry, James, poor bastard in Jersey, you don't ever get that hardly ever this time of year.
Never. It's actually sunny, but it's freezing.
Well, but that's why you see and again, I'm one of them. Jersey people in March, when they hit that 165-degree day, everyone's outside with shorts on. It's so exciting, because it's so rare. And I'm not saying it's that rare to have a case that nothing goes wrong, but it happens more often than you think that there's issues and challenges that happen, and that usually punches new reps right in the gut. Like, holy shit, they trained us different challenges in training, but nothing like this. Nurses are prepared for that. They understand that that's the job. You're dealing with the lives on the line. You're dealing with People, they're unpredictable. The human body's unpredictable. There's not that you do the same thing every time and that you're 100% going to have the same result. It doesn't always work that way. So to have that experience, to know what you're getting into, that anything can happen at any moment, is huge, and a huge hiring point for these hiring managers. And then lastly, communication with physicians. You're working side by side with these doctors. You know what they want. The key that every device pharma, any sales rep, the goal that they're looking for when they're calling on their physicians, on their customers, is to learn their key drivers. That's what they really want. That's what they're really looking for. What is something about products that they always want to see? Again, it could be OR efficiency. You guys have a really good understanding of what it takes, to be in an OR and make it run smoothly. A lot of reps, they come in, they don't understand that. They get in there and they think, well, so what? We got to add an extra 10 minutes to the case. You're like, well, we have 8 cases today. You can't just keep adding parts to this case, so you could come in there, and even with this setup, this is one of the things, is a quick lesson for a lot of you out there. A lot of you guys think it's just about running the case. It's not. There's so much that happens before the case starts. I used to, when I was selling spinal cord stim, I'm walking nurses and staff through, if there's a scrub nurse, whoever's in there, circulating nurse, and we're having conversations, making sure that they're prepared, making sure I'm set up, making sure they're set up. Do they have any questions? If you're not doing this, guys, it's not like the case just happens smoothly. And you just walk in and all of a sudden you're handing the doctor or walking people through with your product. No, you have to be there a lot of times, sometimes an hour before the case starts. So there's so much that happens. Nurses have that understanding. They know what it's like to work with physicians and what they're looking for. And that is huge, because sometimes it takes sales reps months, sometimes, a long time, longer than that, to really understand the flow and know what it's like and be able to communicate well with the doctor. A lot of young reps, they get in there and they're so nervous and they feel like they're intimidated because it's such a, a high, dealing with medical terminology, dealing with doctors, patients. Doctors are so smart. So you try to sound smart and just keep talking, and you wind up just sounding like an idiot instead of just being controlled, relaxed, cool. And a lot of the nurses have that. They know they have that demeanor, that calm demeanor that physicians respect. So they do very well with that. So the main challenge is, and one quote I wrote down is, you guys all have an advantage. The challenge is knowing how to position it. And we're going to talk about that. So quickly, I want to get into the reality of medical sales. So it's not like everyone just comes from these tough nursing jobs that are really demanding and they have to work all these hours and their pay is good, but it doesn't really keep scaling up for what they're really worth. Because I think nurses and a lot of these clinical personnel are amazing individuals. They have a very, very tough job. But it's not like you just go from that into medical sales and all of a sudden they're throwing money at you. You get all this autonomy that you can just be in the car all day long and have fun, and it's just, all sunshine and rainbows. It's not that way, guys. And so, it's the big difference is the pressure to perform. This is one of the biggest things, guys. Now you got to hit a number, right? So you'll learn that, when you got to chase that number and you're not hitting your number a quarter or two in a row, the pressure is on. These companies, they don't let people miss their number year after year. They will find someone else. So that's a big difference in what the expectations are. As a clinical person, the patient's safe, the case went well, safety is everything, outcomes, everything. Of course, that's the same with medical sales, but you still have to hit a number. You still have people going, you're doing great in the OR, but you don't have any cases this month or this week. They're going to get on you. So to get that pressure is something new to a lot of clinical personnel that they're not used to. So you got to be prepared for that. It's not an easy transition, And then again, it turns that, on the same token, we're talking about quotas. Got a quota. Every quarter, you're going to get a quota. Either every month, every quarter, every year, you have a quota to hit. If you're not hitting your quota, that's it. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Doesn't matter how good you are clinically. It's about hitting the quota and driving those results. Another challenge, you could have long days in the OR. To be up very early in the morning. Typically, from what I know, a lot of nurses work those 12-hour shifts. But sometimes you could be in the operating room, have to be there at 6 in the morning, for a 7 a.m. case, and not get out till 10 at night. I mean, it's just sometimes it's unpredictable. Sometimes you have a lot of freedom, and then sometimes it's very unpredictable. So you got to be used to that. Typically, clinical people know their schedule, and unless they want to do overtime or pick up shifts, it's set on that shift type schedule when you know where you're going to be. This can be very unpredictable, especially if you have certain positions where you have a beeper, when you're in trauma. And trauma is one of the toughest jobs out there. I commend anyone that does it. That wouldn't be for me to get beeped. So when you're on call certain weekends, your cell phone's going off. You have to leave dinner with your family. I mean, I knew trauma reps that I have one buddy who's been doing it for over 20 years, and he's an amazing rep, done very, very well. But he's like a unicorn out there. There's very few people that can do a sales role in trauma for 20-something years because you're constantly, being taken away from family, friends, celebrations, all these special occasions that you never know one day to the next where you're going to be because, in the trauma space, emergencies happen and you have to be there. And then another major adjustment is commissions. So there's some medical sales jobs out there that they have a very low base salary. So you could be making $150,000 as a nurse and then go back to a $70,000 base and be like, oh, wow, I can't do that. Not realizing, because it's hard at first, where the majority of your pay is going to come from commissions. So you can make $300,000 in commission in a year if you really blow it out. But it's a different type of mentality. You're used to getting that steady paycheck, and now you're not making as much, so you got to go out there and perform to earn it. That's a big adjustment. So to break down some of the pros and cons, to recap. Pros, high earning potential. Definitely can make a lot of money in this industry. There's many reps. I'm not saying that 50% of the reps, the average rep nationwide makes $172,000 a year. But there's many reps making 300 plus. You could do very well. Definitely 200 plus. There's some reps I know making 500, 600, 700,000 a year. That's very rare, but it happens. So you have that income potential to do that. Huge pro. The autonomy, like I said, there's days when you're out of control. You don't control anything because you're in the operating room all day. But there's a lot of days in these sales roles where you're controlling your schedule. And you're also in the car all day long. So you don't have someone, screaming at you every 5 seconds, tell you to do something. Everyone is looking over your shoulder. If you have to go and, get the dry cleaning done, stop, make an appointment at the dentist, drop the kids off at school. A lot of these tasks can be done because of that flexibility because you're in the car. You're not sitting behind a desk all day. And then, like I talked about, the career growth. Individuals starting as a clinical specialist, working their ways up to a vice president. I don't see that as much on the clinical side. Typically, someone is a tech, nurse, they could get promoted to a chief nursing officer or different positions. But a lot of time they're in those roles, they're getting their steady raises, and it's not as much as a fast career track like in med sales. Some of the cons, like I said, the performance pressure. Guys, it's real. It's real. So if that's not for you, you got to really think about it. You have to have that ability to handle that pressure. And the thing that sucks there, because there's some days you're doing everything right, and doctors go on vacation. There's challenges getting product, or your company has their own internal challenges. You just don't have the bandwidth to get to certain areas, and you're struggling to hit that number, and you feel like you're doing everything, and all these outside obstacles are in your way. So it's really, really a struggle, and it's tough sometimes, and it's stressful. Like I said, unpredictable schedule. We already talked about that. And then it's competitive environment. Guys, this is why they like a lot of athletes. They like military backgrounds, athletic backgrounds. They love collegiate athletes. They want people that have been in competitive situations. I remember one of my first roles, the first like 2 months out, I was always helping everyone else out. I was always helping everyone else out in the team, and my manager would go, Joe, I love what you're doing. That's great. He goes, but you're going to see you're competing against these people. We're all ranked against one another. The higher your rank, the higher commissions you're going to get. That's the way it was when I started in pharmaceutical sales in the industry. So you do get that competitive aspect, and you do get a little selfish, where you're like, shit, I'm here to blow out my number. Whatever I can do to give myself an advantage, I'm going to do. Don't get me wrong. I was always the type of person to always help people out, but you're still there to compete. So you have to put your competitive hat on. If you want these roles, you have to be a competitor. You want to be number one. That is your goal. Second sucks. What's the movie, James? It's an 80s movie.
Second sucks.
You're not going to know this. You're too young. It's with Over the Top. It's Sylvester Stallone. Did you ever see it?
No, I've never seen it.
All right.
I'm a big Sly guy too. I'm surprised I haven't seen it.
Get Over the Top tonight.
I'll have to watch that.
Cheesy 80s movie. It's about arm wrestling because that'll make you laugh.
Oh yeah. I saw that, but I never really watched the whole thing. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking
so
about.
Bull Hurley, he's the main bad guy. Big badass, bald guy, monster. And they interview everyone before the final round, and he talks about that I just came here to break arms, win. He goes, all I'm here to do is win. He goes, second sucks. And again, you're killing me that you don't know this movie, but that's the movie reference of the day. And if you did know it, I think you would appreciate that one. But watch it tonight.
I'll have to watch.
It's good.
I'll have to watch it. Anthony's trying to get me to watch My Blue Heaven. I haven't seen that. There's a lot of
another great
classic movies that I haven't seen.
You'll love that too. It's cheesy 80s humor. Same with slides, cheesy 80s action. I mean, who makes a movie about arm wrestling? But it's somehow exciting, and it's a great movie.
People were commenting Over the Top. Bull Hurley.
Thank you. Who's that? Katie? Is that a Katie?
Cav Kaz 86 on YouTube.
Thank you, whoever that is. I appreciate it. But the whole point is it's about competing. You want to be number one. So the trade-off is you're trading that clinical stress for performance stress. That's the main difference. So how do you transition from scrubs to sales? Okay. Number one, you got to reframe your experience. Okay. You got to really be able to illustrate your transferable skills. That's what they really want to see, guys. You're in the operating room. You're doing this job every day. The only difference is you don't have a number tied to it. But you all have outcomes that you're tied to. I mean, a lot of these systems, I don't know how many are still in the capitated system where they basically, hospitals get reimbursed by the performance on how they do by different, scores with patients and however whatever the outcomes of for those patients. So they are getting ranked, they are getting these scores. So there is some pressure, but the whole point is to be able to take your transferable skills and illustrate that in your resume, in the conversations, in the interviews that you're having with these hiring managers. Because again, some of the things you talk about, communication, that's relationship building. You guys communicate with patients every day. You're communicating with doctors every day. You're building relationships. That's exactly what a medical sales rep does. Problem solving. It's the same as solution selling. You're going to be the best reps provide solutions. They don't just offer features and benefits. They solve problems. That's how you're really an asset. That's how you bring real value, because you could come in there and actually solve a problem instead of just shooting out features and benefits. Teamwork. Guys all do this every day. You're on the operating room every day. You have a team. You got the doctor. You got the nurses. You got the techs. You got biomed. You got the full staff there, guys. It's the same thing in medical sales. Even though you're in your car all day long, you're typically by yourself, you're still working in a team. You're working with your district manager, your regional business manager, but everyone is there to help each other to hit their goals. That's the whole, again, that's the correlation between the two environments. So next is learning sales fundamentals. So guys, we teach this at the RepPath Academy. A lot of nurses come in and you're going to learn how to sell just by working with the other individuals that are taking the course. Because there's a lot of experienced medical sales reps that still take our course because they're looking to get their next role. You got younger individuals that come from different sales backgrounds. You're going to see how they approach different challenges, and you're going to learn how to sell just by working with them. Working with me, working with my team, working with the rest of the academy members. It's a very, very challenging part for clinical. One of the most challenging aspects from clinical to from scrubs to sales is learning how to sell. And you're going to learn that. We're going to teach you that in the academy. Objection handling. That guy's got to learn how to handle objections. You guys do it. You're doing it now. Where you're working with your physicians. Now, I don't think you could just totally tell your physician every time they give you an objection, screw you, we're doing it this way. No, but neither do sales reps, So it's learning how to work with your physicians, your team, and handling those objections, because no one just comes into these sales roles and doctors say yes to them all day long. They have a lot of objections, guys, and you got to learn how to handle that. And then one of the biggest challenges, and this is for most reps, I don't care clinical background or not, is to have that real closing mindset. You really want to be able, and we teach this too at the academy. We're going to teach you how to close. We're going to teach you how to close not only in the interview process, but also how to be a closer, an effective closer in your conversations with your physicians. Next step to break again, your networking strategy. Okay, guys, you got to focus, on three main individuals. Medical sales reps, hiring managers, recruiters. Okay, but start with the opening first. I know people will say, well, if you get there when the opening is there, you got there too late. Okay, well, if you had a crystal ball, great. And I know a lot of times when you have enough conversations, openings happen at a company that you spoke to a couple of weeks ago, and now they have an opening so that you're fresh in their mind. That's great too. But at the end of the day, start focusing where openings are, and don't apply to 500 jobs. That's not going to get you anywhere, guys. That's called spray and pray. We talk about this on almost every podcast. It's a waste of time. They can ignore you forever. You have to be tenacious with networking. After you send your resume, you are simultaneously networking with sales reps that work with that hiring manager. You're not just asking questions, just tell me about the role. It's about building a business plan about that specific opening. So you can go in there and present that to the hiring manager, showing them exactly what you've done, to prepare for this role, and give them a specific 30, 60, 90 day plan. So for some of you who don't know, that's what you're doing the first 30, 60, 90 days in the field, where it's specific to the doctors you're calling on, the hospitals you're calling on. What are the current challenges and how you're going to solve them? Putting that into a plan, that's what's going to knock their socks off. You want to make sure you're speaking to at least 3 reps. If you could speak to 20, great. For one specific role though. I'm not talking about interviewing with 5 different companies and then speaking to 3 different reps. No. If you're pursuing 5 different companies, you want to speak to at least 15 reps total. So it's 3 per role, and that's the minimum. I'm telling you, if you make this a non-negotiable with yourself every time, it's going to force you to not just send a resume and then cross your fingers. It doesn't do shit. You got to send that resume and immediately get on the phone. Immediately get on LinkedIn. Start reaching out to people. Start having conversations. Start learning. But position yourself as the solution. When they start talking about the challenges, think about how you've handled something similar like that in the past and how you can help solve some of these issues they're having so you can bring value and be hired at that company. So again, another note I have is use LinkedIn effectively. Obviously, guys, like I just said, and try to get some ride-alongs. If you can, buy someone a coffee, maybe take them to lunch. See what companies are open to have you get a ride-along where you can observe not so much the OR aspect of it, but that part you guys, most of you have down pat. Get in the field to see what it's like, because it's hard for sales reps that are trying to learn the hospital or OR side, because with vendor credentialing these days, it's hard for them to get you into the operating room, because you're not allowed. You guys already have that experience. You want to see the office-based one. You want to see how they're actually selling with doctors in offices, and that's very important because you'll see sometimes they get 5 seconds. Sometimes they don't see doctors, so you want to really learn and understand what that's like. And for some of you out there, go start calling on offices. Say you're trying to learn about a product. Say you're interviewing with XYZ company and you just wanted to see, what the doctor thought of this drug or this device. You're going to see it's really hard. So you want to really learn that and have a real hands-on experience of what that's like. So if you can get some ride-alongs, that's key because it also could, it can make you say, maybe I don't want to do this, because it's not for everyone. But you want to make sure you have all the, you have all the exposure to this so you can make an intelligent decision moving forward if you want to do it or not. Step 4 is positioning yourself in interviews. Okay. That's basically number one. Why are you leaving the clinical work? What is it about medical sales? You don't ever want to talk, and this is no matter who you are out there, you don't ever want to talk like you're running from something. That's the worst thing you can do. When you start bashing the company or saying like, I don't care. I don't care what I do. I just have to get out of here. And believe me, people say this in interviews. It's mind blowing. They're never going to hire someone that wants that. It's about going towards the future and the positive aspects of wherever you're going. That's what you want to focus on, not where you're running from. But you need to have that story of why you want to get into medical sales. Why sales overall? And then lastly, why now? What's happening now? And it could be as simple as I've been working with these medical sales reps for a couple of years. I love what they do in the cath lab. I do exactly what they do. I can bring more to the table because I have much more clinical knowledge, and be able to come and work with an amazing company like Stryker, like Medtronic, like Boston Scientific, whoever it is, so you need to have these answers prepared, guys. And then the last thing you need to do is show your hunger and competitiveness. That's what most clinical people miss out on. They don't show that killer instinct. And I don't blame them. They haven't been trained that way. They're not in a sales environment every day. But if you can showcase your competitive aspect, whether you're an athlete in the past, whatever you do to compete, make sure you're illustrating that in the interview. It's going to help you break in. And then just some entry, last point I want to bring up before we take some questions. The entry point roles, titles to focus on. Number 1, associate roles. Okay. Number 2, clinical specialist. Clinical specialist, actually, I obviously I have that number 1. But you've got to make sure when it comes to a clinical specialist role. So for some of you that don't understand the difference, an associate sales role and a clinical specialist role could technically be the same role. A lot of times associate roles, they support a territory manager. The territory manager is the sales rep. They're the ones with the quota that they have to hit. Your job as an associate is to help your territory manager hit their quota. If they hit their quota, you typically get a quarterly bonus. Sometimes they can have different structures where you get commissions too. Excuse me. But most of the time, if you're a TM, your territory manager hits their goal, you're going to get a quarterly bonus. Okay. So you might have, majority of the time, you might be in the operating room, but you also could help them with some sales responsibility. So same with the clinical specialist. You want to make sure, especially for clinical specialist role, you might think, because it says clinical specialist, that you're just going to be covering cases and working with patients all day long. That's not always the case, guys. So you want to make sure, or vice versa, if you think that as a clinical specialist, you're going to have some sales responsibilities too, you have to make sure, because sometimes you don't. So make sure you're clarifying, knowing what you're getting into. Is this a full clinical role? Because there's a lot of nurses that get in to become a clinical specialist and they stay clinical specialists for years because they have all the, the benefits of working, for a great medical sales company. They have all the benefits. They get the pay increases. They're not going to, if they don't want to switch and become a sales rep, they could stay a clinical specialist forever. Now, are they going to make, do they have the potential that a territory manager does? No. But some of these companies give them the option. You just want to be a clinical specialist the rest of your career, which is fine. But if not, if you want to eventually get to become a territory manager, make sure you're asking these questions, because sometimes it's a clinical specialist path and there is no path to sales. You have to make sure that if I do this role, the goal that I want in 2-3 years is to become a territory manager. Make sure you're letting them know that in the interview. I'll pause here. This is a good time to stop. James, any questions?
Yeah, we got quite a few, Joe. We got 1 second. That's not really a question. Brent Wiley, what can I do to separate myself over a candidate with more traditional background?
What do you do? I mean, this is what we teach at the academy, and that's showing them one of the key things to do when you're up against more experienced reps, which is going to almost happen on every single interview, you know, and that's really illustrating, number one, illustrating the effectiveness of whatever your background is, and be able to illustrate that on your resume. But you got to get the interview first. And we do that too. We optimize resumes. That's one of the first things we do in the academy. So you need to do that first. But more importantly, you got to let them know how you own your own development, as it's one of the most important things you could say in an interview. Owning your own development basically means you do whatever it takes to get your skills up to speed even quicker. You don't wait for a company to teach you that. You go out there and do it, whether it's looking at videos on YouTube of surgeries, whether it's doing research online, whether it's having conversation with ever high performers in the industry, or speaking to key opinion leaders that are physicians, whatever it is, it's owning your own development to get where you need to be. So that is key. If you can illustrate that and show them, because remember, all of us have had a role. Every role that we've been in our lives, we never had experience at one time. So same with that arrogant hiring manager. That same person, he's never done every role that he has. At one point, he never did that before. Now all of a sudden he's a 20-year veteran. So but the key to overcome that, and you've done this, all of you have done this. You've all had roles that you never did before. How did you get up to your speed? And that's by owning your own development. That's how you get ahead of individuals that have 5-10 years more experience.
He added that he's interviewing for a role to infusion centers, selling to infusion centers. He has a clinical background and B2C sales, and it seems like most of the candidates he's up against have hospital experience.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's going to happen. If they're giving you an interview, right? If that's what you're saying, the problem is that you're getting the interview, but you're getting beat out in the interviews, then it's something that you're saying during the interview process. Because remember, if they get your resume and they know your background before they set up an interview with you, they don't just blindly set up interviews. So they like something about your background that makes you a good candidate to speak with. So realize that you're in a good position. If you're not getting interviews, then there's a problem with your resume and how you're presenting yourself, how you're reaching out, how you're networking. We cover all this. I'm not going to sit here shamelessly, and I have no shame that I am here to get people to join the academy, because I know how well it works, and I know a lot of the struggles you're going through, guys. So if that's the problem, we can help with that too. But typically, if you're getting interviews and you're just not moving forward, something is missing during how you're translating your background.
I got Pete Thibodeau. My daughter's finishing up her nursing degree and is already talking about pivoting into medical sales after she gets some floor experience. Is 2 years of clinical enough, or does she need more before making the move?
I mean, it depends on the company, but typically, yes, I would say that. I think 2 years is enough. It depends on the role, and it depends on what they're looking for. Sometimes they're looking for 5 years plus, but a lot of times 2 years is definitely enough experience and enough exposure for anyone to take that and stand out on the medical sales side.
We have Liz Hardigan, what's the honest answer on work-life balance? I became a nurse partly because of the schedule flexibility. Is medical sales going to eat my evenings and weekends, or is that just the first year?
Well, it doesn't matter. It depends on the role. So if you're worried about scheduling, don't do trauma. You don't want a trauma job. That's not for you. Trauma is very unpredictable. And especially when you start out, you're the low man on the totem pole. Uh, they're going to give you, they're going to look for you to cover every annoying case, late night, weekend. They're going to try to throw everything at you. A, because you're new and you got to earn your dues. But also, you got to get that experience. So, and it might not, and it's not that glamorous when you first start. A lot of times you're just bringing trays from hospital to hospital. I mean, that's basically bringing the equipment there. It's not that glamorous, but it has nothing. It depends on the company. There's many companies out there that you're not going to work past 5 o'clock. A lot of times they're elective procedures. You know, Everyone wants to get out by a certain time. You might start earlier than you normally would in some of your hospital positions, but for the most part, it really depends on the role. So if you have further questions, more specific questions, feel free to shoot me a DM and then we can discuss.
I got Cleveland Browns Tony 21. Browns guy.
Well,
Might be worse than me.
I don't
That's
know,
saying a
man. The
lot as a
Jets.
Jets fan. Saying a lot as a Jets fan. Every sales job posting says 2 years sales experience required, and then I find out the person they hired was a PA with zero sales background. What's actually going on behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, there could be something that they're just not, they're screwing up from the company's point of view by not putting down everything, all the kinds of candidates that they're looking for. I mean, they could equate 2 years of sales experience, but also, not expect many PAs to apply for the role. And sometimes they go, wow, the PA is applying. They actually bring 5 years of PA experience, and that equates to more than 2 years in my mind, or whoever's hiring minds. That could happen sometimes. So it depends on the specific company and role, but you never know. I mean, I know there's times I've had physicians apply for certain roles, and of course they have no sales experience. Sometimes companies still don't want to hire them, but a lot of times they're like, wow, I never expected a doctor, I never expected a primary care physician to apply for a pharmaceutical role to sell a primary care medicine. So they don't have to abide by whatever requirement they're looking for.
I got Trevor. Good luck pronouncing this. Wojciech whiskey. Wild
Jowski
last
guy.
name. Wild last name. Totally butchered it. I I made
Sorry,
the
Trevor.
yeah, I apologize, Trevor. Don't hold it against me. I made the transition from cardiac cath lab 4 years ago, and the single biggest gap I had to close wasn't product knowledge; it was understanding how to create urgency without damaging trust. How do you coach people from clinical background on that specific tension?
Yeah, I mean it takes time. I mean it's not something that happens overnight. You have to set. Um, well, I'll say this: being in the sales role is going to force you to get urgency. Companies are good at that. It's a different environment. Hospital administrators aren't saying, Trevor, you got to get 15 patients in today. You're like, the hell are you talking about? I don't control who comes in and out the door. They're never going to ask for that. But when companies are asking you, they're lighting a fire under your ass. You're going to figure it out. When they say you have to get 10 cases in this month, or 20 cases in this month, whatever it is, you go out there and you hunt. You will figure it out because that fire, again, you don't do it 1 month 2 months in a row, and you see them on you every day, and they start, because they're going to get on you and pressure you to really hit your number, and that's the stressful part. But that stress motivates you. So once you get that habit, you're the pushing to get more business, changing that conversation with doctors where it's more warm and fuzzy, and then you got to go in there to ask for the business. It's going to come as you get that pressure too. That helps.
We got Kendall J. I'm a rad tech and feel completely invisible in this conversation. Is imaging and radiology a viable entry point, or am I better off pivoting specialties?
Oh, absolutely, radiology. If you're a rad tech, I mean, I have a buddy that he used to own multiple radiology facilities in New Jersey, and to have someone with a rad tech experience and that understands the clinical side of radiology, that's a huge, huge aspect. So you want to look in on the diagnostic side. There's a lot of diagnostic roles that are out there, a lot of sales roles where you're getting, for instance, you want to get, you work for XYZ company, your goal is to get doctors to send as many MRIs, and x-rays to your facility. And then once you bill out the insurance companies, then you're going to get bonus, accordingly, depending on how well you're doing. So definitely, 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 rad techs are great candidates, but I think you're better candidates, not so much for the pharmaceutical side, more definitely for the diagnostic side, and also some medical device role. But I would focus on diagnostics first.
I got Maddox builds. I keep hearing get into pharma first, then move to device. Is that still the move, or is that outdated advice at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if you would call it outdated because that was never the typical path. Again, with us, it's always going to be full transparency. Even though I'm going to contradict my background, and I'll tell you why. I started in pharma and then got into device. I started in Organon, and then I was there for 5 years, got promoted to the hospital team, and then we got bought out by Shear and Cloud, so they laid us off. And I got a role at Boston Scientific, which is a medical device company. Now, most device managers do not want to hire pharma reps. They have the stigma out there that they're lazy. That's the way they look at them. I'm not saying everyone, before I get all kinds of heat here. They there is that stigma because they're not in the operating room. They typically are not working as long of a day as a device rep. So they think they're lazy. My experience, there's lazy pharma reps, there's lazy device reps. But at the end of the day, the typical route, if you go pharma, it's very hard to get into device. Now, that's where I contradict this. I did start in pharma, got into device. I only got into device because I had a strong pain background. I was selling I was selling a drug called Avinza for a few years, so I knew a lot of pain specialists. So Boston Scientific liked that because I was getting into spinal cord stimulation, calling on pain doctors. I knew a lot of the doctors. That's why I got the job. Typically, they don't like to hire pharma reps. But the reverse, if you start in device, you could go anywhere from there. Very rare. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that all pharma companies love device backgrounds. Sometimes they say, no, we just want a pharma rep. But for the most part, they are never going to say, well, we're not going to hire you because you're not working as much or as long. Typically, device reps on average have better relationships because they're in the OR. So you could take those relationships, call on the same doctors where you're on a first name basis with a lot of these guys because they look at you as almost an extension of their staff in the operating room, and you could do really well quickly. So a lot of times, device, you could get into anywhere. Pharma, it could be challenging to go from pharma to device.
I have Juliana Badencourt. I'd love to get into medical slash pharma sales at some point. What would you recommend for someone trying to break in?
I mean, Juliana, that's thank you for calling. I've spoken to Juliana, online in the past. So thank you for joining today, Juliana. When it comes to breaking in, obviously that's a loaded question. It depends on your background. Number one, sales experience. The more sales experience you can get outside B2B sales experience is the primary sales experience a lot of these companies look for. When I say outside, that means speaking face to face with customers as opposed to an inside sales role where you're on the phone. Okay, they want to see you actually interact with a customer because that's what you're doing in medical sales. Now, while you're on the phone some days, you're emailing, you're doing all that. But at the end of the day, you're face to face with doctors, selling products, selling services. That's what they look for. Some of the key companies that they look for are ADP, Paychecks, these are the B2B sales roles. Cintas, Enterprise, UniFirst, Sherwin-Williams, all these companies, the reason why they love them is that they know that if you go to one of these companies, they have outstanding sales training. So you're going to know how to sell. They just have to teach you how to sell their products. That's why they really love that experience. They love that background. So that's huge. The other thing is the networking aspect, guys. This is where people screw up a lot. They reach out to anyone and everyone. Guys, it doesn't work. It's good to have a couple of calls to learn about the industry. But if you're on the phone every day, just going down on LinkedIn, again, you could spend 50 lifetimes contacting people every day. You got to network with intention, like I mentioned earlier, where you're building a business plan. You're focusing on where an opening is, talking to reps that know that hiring manager, that know that territory. The closer they are to that territory, the better. That's the target that you want to network with. Not if you're interviewing at Stryker and you're speaking to someone, it's in their cardiac division, and you're speaking to people in their ortho division, that doesn't make any sense. Stryker's so big, they might not even know that they had that division. They might not know anyone in that division. But if you're focusing on that specific role and then branching out, from contacting those reps, the individuals that know about that opening, and then branch out from there, you're going to get much more valuable information. Again, we can help you. All of this, Juliana, we teach at the Academy. We've taken individuals from every possible background, without experience, without degrees, didn't matter, no clinical, no sales. We've helped all those individuals. We have the process to get you there.
I got Naomi Feld. How should someone with a highly specialized clinical background calibrate their job search? Is it better to go deep into the niche that matches your specialty, or cast a wider net and risk losing the edge that makes you distinctive?
I would start first by definitely going more specific. Go right into your niche. If you're calling on neurologists, look at those neurology openings. You're obviously going to see a lot less openings, but be razor focused in those areas, and then be tenacious networking. That's where the real work comes in. Can't say it enough, guys, but I would focus there. Focus where you're good at, and if you're not finding out many opportunities, then start widening the net a little bit. But I wouldn't just go, I'll take any job that's out there and just panic, and then all of a sudden just start applying to everything. No, focus on those roles first. Doesn't mean you can't apply to other roles, but I just don't want to see you guys going out there and just applying to everything and then waiting to hear back from people, because that's what happens. You spread yourself too thin. You can't network and be tenacious with 50 different companies. You don't have the time to do that. It's impossible. Not enough hours in the day. But if you focus on a few and put in that effort, like I was describing, then you're going to have much better chances of breaking in.
Quite ambitious 22. How do you manage the isolation of territory life when you're coming from a hospital environment where you were surrounded by a team every single shift?
Yeah, and it depends on your background and what you're used to. It's definitely an adjustment, because there's days you're lonely in the car. Sometimes you have 45 minutes, an hour from one hospital to the next. I used to get whatever phone calls I had to get in. If there's books on tape, that's a great way to kill time. Listen podcasts to keep so you're not sitting there just listening to music from office to office or whatever it is. But it definitely is an adjustment. Now, for me, I love it. I've been doing it my whole life, but I love being, having my alone time, going from, one hospital to the next or one office to the next. But if you're used to that office-based environment, it's going to take some time, and it might not be for everyone, but for the most part, most of the individuals I speak with, that's definitely not a big concern, because it's not like you're in the car all day long. And there's times you're in the car for 3 minutes, you're at your next office or next hospital, and you're in there and you're interacting with people all day. So it's just that travel time when there's a lot of alone time. You're in offices sometimes, waiting for doctors. A lot of times you'll see the same reps in offices. You'll start bullshitting with them. There's patients in the office you start talking to. I mean, you're never alone by yourself 8-10 hours a day, guys. That doesn't exist. So I don't want to create a false, reality. It's something that most reps, they adjust, and it's not really an issue.
Matt from Ohio _ how do you find and connect with hiring managers or reps who made the same clinical to sales transition? Is that an actual move for networking, or is there a better way?
Yeah, well, first thing I would do, I would post that. I think one of the things, and again, keep saying it, but we do teach this, and our members, our RepPath members, they see the value in posting. A lot of you guys don't post enough. You put on your job open to work with that green, whatever, that green slash, and think that people are just going to jump at because you said open to work. Start posting. You can post as much as you want. Post that exact question today. Post it out there. See how people react to that. Say, I'm in this role, coming from this. Does anyone else have this experience? I'm looking to break into the industry. See what the responses you get. People need to know that. That's the big difference, that no one's going to know what you're looking to do unless you say it. So I would start, number one, with posting on LinkedIn. I also go on LinkedIn, start looking at people's backgrounds. Start looking at people with nursing, and do searches with nurse and med device. You'll see people, they'll come up, that have both of those experiences, and start asking, having conversations. A lot of these individuals are going to be more than happy to talk to you and help you out because they've been in your shoes, especially in the sales end. Guys, sales reps, they're nice. For the most part, they have to be nice, or no one's going to let them in and give them business. So they get it. A lot of these individuals get it. I would do those searches and see what comes up.
Last question I got for you, Joe. The real Marcos. Does an EMT background carry any real weight with hiring managers, or is it mostly RNs and surgical techs that get callbacks?
No, that's not true. EMT definitely carries weight. It's another clinical role. You're dealing with patients, you're dealing with physicians in the emergency room. You're in that high pressure situation. Absolutely would they love that background. It's another clinical background, and it's a high pressure clinical background. So realize that. You guys understand a lot of aspects of medicine that a lot of sales reps don't. So you have an advantage over a lot of people that are on the sales side. So definitely don't look at it as you have to be a nurse or a tech. EMTs, they do very well in this business too.
That's all I got for you today, Joe.
That's it. Awesome, man. Thank you, James. And thank you, everyone, for listening in today and asking great questions, guys. A lot of great questions. James, you got to do your homework, man. Over the Top tonight. Watch it. Bull Hurley is one of my favorite characters of all time.
I got to watch it.
Yes. But yeah, so definitely watch that. Guys, again, I know I mentioned it 100 times. If you're having these challenges, join us for the RepPath Academy. Get into the program. We can help you starting today. Don't hesitate. Don't keep waiting. Stop being feeling like you're on an island out there and not have the answers and think that they're just going to come to you. We can help you. We can help you save time. Because again, I don't want to see you get frustrated and give up. So go on RepPath.com, or shoot me a DM so I can get you started. Lastly, any lobby members, as always, guys, give the promo code Licata, Licata. Click it right there on the screen, so you can get additional discounts. But that's it for this week, guys. If you need me, please shoot me a message, shoot me an email. If not, we'll be doing these every Monday and Wednesday. So join us for the RepPath podcast. If I don't hear from you, have a great week and a great weekend, and we'll talk next week. Take care.